Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of the Fast Forward Expert Roundtable. My name is Craig Hart. I'm with Vertical Alliance Group. Today, we're going to be talking about mental health behind the wheel, improving the mental health and attitude in your fleet. With me, as always, is Mr. Mark Ray. For those of you unfamiliar with Mark, he's one of you. He's a former trucking executive. Over 35 years experience in the field. He has now transitioned away from the frontline trucking operations, but still remains very much plugged in with industry organizations and advises groups both within and without the transportation industry. And he's got a great mind because he has been where you have been and he has seen what you have seen and probably lived to tell the tale. And Mark, it's always lovely to see you again, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. We've got a really great speaker today, Horatio Neely. Difficult issue, the mental side. Every carrier I talk to is struggling with the driver shortage issue, and contributing to that is disqualifications for physical problems, but there also are mental problems that can be addressed through counseling instead of prescriptions. And Horatio's got a great program, the Driving Well program. So I'm really looking to look forward to this. This is a difficult issue, but it is a very real issue.
And Mark, this builds on kind of a series of things that we have been doing, and hopefully some of our longtime viewers have been paying attention. The goal here is to expose you all to new tools that can help make a difference in keeping your drivers with you. And there is no magic bullet. There is no one thing that you can do that is going to raise your retention level to where you need it to be. In the past, we have done webinars on parking and how to do that strategically, physical wellness. And in this session we're doing today is really springboarding off of that first session that we did back in April, because it is a huge component of what's driving people out of the trucks and off the road and out of the industry completely. So without further ado, I would like to bring on with us today Horatio Neely with Neely Counseling out of San Antonio, Texas. Good afternoon, Horatio. How are you doing today?
Hey, good afternoon. Happy to be here, guys.
Excellent. Now, Horatio, if you would, could you help set the stage for our listeners today about who you are and who is Neely Counseling?
Yeah, so as you said earlier, I'm with Neely Counseling Center. I've been around the trucking transportation industry for over 2 decades, past 20 years. And I always tease, I cut my teeth in the industry. I went from moving groceries to moving cars. So I started out with HEB, and then I moved into what we call Gulf States Toyota, the trucking company of Gulf States Toyota's U.S. Auto Logistics. I am a strong mental health advocate. We'll talk more about how I got into it more. But I would tell you, based on my educational background, when I came into trucking industry, I quickly realized that there was a gap in reference to that soft skill. And I wanted to use my experience to really understand the psychology of the driver and really help others in that environment as well.
Excellent. Now, Neely Counseling Center that you mentioned, and here's some particulars for those of you at home. Did you want to kind of give the bigger picture view of who Neely is before we dive into more of the logistics side of things?
Yeah, exactly. And I won't go bullet for bullet, but I'll tell you that we've been at it for quite some time, since 2001. Our founder and my partner in crime, Dr. Curleen Neely, she's passionate about mental health. And we really look at Neely Counseling Center as a platform for preventive mental health. And so a lot of our products and a lot of the things that we do around mental health training in reference to the Backstory Breakthrough or Drive Well, or even an EAP, is really about catching those small issues before they become big. And it's about preventive mental health.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So you have now introduced the term EAP to the folks on the phone today. And I know that there's some of you who have joined us. You may not understand what an EAP is. So we want to take some time to help set the stage with some basics to help with the level of understanding that we can then build from to show you how we're going to focus on logistics with those sorts of things. So
Awesome. So really, my story around EAP is personal because when I came into the industry, I had one of the top drivers that was in my team or around my team that worked for me, and he started to have performance issues to the point to where he had a major accident, where it's the point of no return. He hit someone from behind. And what happened is that as you unraveled his story, he was having marital problems and he suffered in silence. And so out of that scenario, I really made an effort to stay engaged, build the relationship and try to understand, why do drivers or even support teams suffer in silence? And I think it's mostly because of not having the right platform of the culture for them. So when we talk about an EAP, it's really a work-based program. It's sponsored, it's free, confidential assessments that are provided by companies that sign up for an employee assistance program. And they provide short-term counseling, and we'll talk about the type of counseling that's involved. But I think more important is follow-up services for employees for personal and work-related issues. Because typically we just think about the driver at work, but we never talk about that home life for drivers away. And then, of course, when you hear EAP, a lot of people think about financial and legal support, but we'll touch on work-life resources as well.
Okay, and for those of you on the call, some of you may be going, hey, I have an EAP through my health insurance provider, and that may be entirely possible. The EAP as an organism is not new, but the question that I would pose to you from the audience is the EAP that you are currently with or using, is that specific to your industry, or is that the typical offering that a larger carrier like a Blue Cross Blue Shield, for example, would make available to any client that they have regardless of industry? So that's kind of where I want your head at as we move forward through this.
Yeah, and so we talked about short-term counseling, and there's a range of issues, dealing with grief, family issues, marital problems, really drug and alcohol abuse, having issues at home with your kids, adolescence problems. And I put depression, anxiety, and stress on that single bullet because it often, what we know to be true is that clinically, depression, anxiety, and stress can be diagnosed clinically. But EAPs are really for mild issues of depression, anxiety, and stress. And so the whole process is to catch those issues before they become big, because we know that inevitably depression or anxiety unchecked can lead to suicide and all kind of craziness.
Absolutely.
Horatio, I got a quick question. What are some general observations that you've made that our clients could use to help possibly identify some of these issues?
So when you think about, and he doesn't have to be, or he or she doesn't have to be your top driver, but a driver that's typically in a good mood, that's always checking in the dispatch, full of jokes. And then one day they're just silent. And then that turns into a week. That turns into 2 weeks. And so being aware that, hey, something's changed with his or her mood. Something's happening with that person. And you can see it because you know their regular behavior. And so that tells you that you need to unravel and figure out that there's a bigger story happening with that person.
So just change of normal personality.
Yeah, person. And I would tell you, being around the trucking industry, that it's full of vibrant and different personalities. And those personalities are very consistent. You know the person who's always engaged and full of jokes. The guy who's really quiet and just goes about doing his business. Those personalities, you can kind of like script them out based on your team.
And I guess the other would be true, the guy or gal who's normally quiet and subdued, that comes in and is rambunctious.
Could be angry, could be aggressive, something along those lines. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
So when you talk about who can participate once you have an EAP on board, I mean, it's really, EAPs are really designed to focus on the holistic approach for a driver, looking at him and his immediate family. Even some EAPs cover everyone in the household. They'll look at either under adoption, kinship, minors. I think one of the key things is that when you look at eligibility, a lot of times it's consistent with the medical eligibility, which means that you can cover someone under your EAP up to 26 years of age. And then one of the things we touched on earlier, Craig, is that where do you find your EAP benefits? It's really in your benefits area, but it's tucked away because EAPs are normally a rider policy. It's just a write-in. Hey, I came in, I sold you some good insurance, and guess what? I'm gonna throw an EAP in on you. So a lot of companies, a lot of employees don't even know they have an EAP because it's thrown in there, and there's little to no implementation to support and promote the EAP benefit.
And I understand implementation. We are in the implementation business sometimes, Mark. So, all right, here, let's dig into this. So,
yeah, so we talked about, the holistic approach and looking at the driver from an ecosystem as things impact their family, impact them directly. They're impacted by management decisions, and looking at the overall wellness. You talk about having a series about the physical component from a driver perspective because there's such a sedentary lifestyle, but there's more to wellness than that physical area. When we talked earlier, Mark, about the benefits of an EAP, which is you're engaged, you can reduce your turnover, you can try to prevent and manage burnout, you provide professional support, and I think most importantly, it's cost effective. Typically, an EAP is priced around per employee per month. So based on the size of your organization, you could have it could be $1.50 per person per employee, or if it's a real large organization, you could just spend $1 per employee per month for EAP. On the retention piece, which is big for our industry, when you talk about turnover being close to 89%, it's tough. So EAPs, when positioned well, it's a perk, it's a benefit. Of course, there's a lot of wellness training, live engagement, and then drivers feel valued, or employees feel valued, that my company is taking the time to invest in me and give me this benefit. And on the implementation, your EAP should be engaging and giving you monthly utilization reports, so you can see who's utilizing the financial or the legal support, or who's utilizing the referral services, and better yet, and most importantly, who's engaging in the mental health portion of the EAP.
I like that.
And then we
cost
touched on
effectiveness note. So I think that you spent some time on it, but I'm sure everyone on the call with us today knows exactly how much it costs their company when they lose one driver. And it's definitely more than $1 or $1.50.
Yeah.
And if you have a program in place that is nowhere near that cost that can keep that driver, gosh, it's tremendous. It's tremendous. You guys can do the math for your organizations. You will see that it makes sense in the nuts and bolts of it.
And I'll be honest with you, Craig, the EAP, for me, especially being in the business, it's not a money grab. This is not a get rich scheme fast. This is, you're providing the services because you realize it takes a lot for organizations to say, hey, I want to pay for EAP benefits outside of medical, outside of the other things that drive their P&L. And I'm sure, Mark, you can talk more about that overall P&L. You barely got enough room for new equipment and new this and trying to take. So now I'm introducing that, hey, why don't you spend some more money on an EAP program, right? So we really want to come back in and give you that benefit. I think more importantly too, newsletters. I cannot tell you, I was fortunate to be in a position where I was driving newsletter activity in my companies, but I knew other companies where there was nothing in place or inconsistency of providing monthly updates on what's happening in the company and giving them insight and different tools just in the form of an electronic newsletter, which is big.
Yeah, I think I hear this all the time. What can I do? What can I do? This driver shortage. And one of the responses I have is, what are you investing in your most valuable resource, which is your drivers? What are you really investing in them? And you'd be surprised some of the answers I get. And this is clearly an investment in that valuable resource, which is your professional drivers that are out there. And again, keeping them, the big benefit here is, how can I keep my guys and gals off of medication? How can I keep them off medication? The reality of burnout is absolutely real. So I get it.
Yeah. So this is just unpacking some of the areas we talked about. When you talk about the driver, you know, the sessions, the counseling model, it can be 1 to 3 models, free sessions, or 1 to 6, but they can be in forms of face-to-face or teletherapy or remote. And we'll talk more about that component. And then I think the mental health education training, you know, we call it psychoeducation. Typically, what I've seen and what I know to be true, especially in transportation, is a gap in just being educated and being aware of mental health. And so we use things freely, or, oh, he's just being bipolar. Oh, he got a lot of anxiety, right?
Or, hey, that guy's crazy. Yeah.
That guy's
Stuff
crazy.
like that.
He's always, it goes back to those personalities, right? I'm thinking about some of my personalities and I just smile, right? But yeah, you know, that training, it cannot be understated. When you talk about the families, it's, you know, being in a position to where you can have a virtual workshop and you can tell your wife or your kid to get on and you can talk to them and they can hear it with you in reference to the different training around relationships and things of that nature, is big. On the wellness side, you know, that's the you know, I know we talk about, and it's big to have a coach on the physical side that can give you a nutritional plan, that can help you with your exercise. I think more importantly for us in the transportation industry is the ability to manage your sleep, especially when you're an over-the-road driver. Certain companies, like the big ones in Texas, you know, really try to make it to where drivers can work within that 10-hour span and get out and back. But unfortunately, you got a lot of, you know, over-the-road drivers, and being able to manage your sleep and having some insight to do that is real tough. And then on the management side, we talked about leadership. Being, you know, a lot of leaders are not equipped to deal with those highly emotional issues. So having an outlet to where they can engage with someone. Mark, the DOT substance abuse training, you know, just the visibility, because you're right. Drivers, you know, medicating or self-medicating in this industry is big. I think about the stories I heard about driving in the 70s. You know, the speed and the different things. And Mark, I don't want to age you here, but from what I understand, driving in the 70s was completely different than driving today, right?
Yes, that's 100% correct. And I would say substance abuse is much improved today through the efforts of our federal motor carrier and the clearinghouse, but it's not gone. And you know, unfortunately, I'm listening to all this and I'm thinking of a discussion I've had with a couple of drivers, and some of the solutions that they are offered is, oh, just take this pill. Just one pill will take care of all these problems for you. Yeah. And that one pill is not what we want them to do.
Well, a lot of times that's systemic of our culture too. Everyone wearing this one pill. You want to lose weight, go take a pill. You want to feel better, go take a pill. So I think more importantly on the management, the CISD, critical incident stress debriefing, which is really those unfortunate times where you may have a traumatic event that take place at work. And I think more importantly for drivers, they may not be involved in a traumatic accident, but they're normally the first responders. I cannot tell you how many times I got a call at 2 or 3 in the morning and a driver is pulled up on a horrific accident, wants some guidance on how to, you know, how do you manage that situation? Of course, we work through our safety directors and management team on that, but drivers you can't unsee what you've seen on the road. And so being able to come back and have an opportunity to debrief, because I'm thinking about one now, drivers are very sensitive and engaged. These guys have the biggest hearts. So for them to pull up on a family that's in a truck I had an incident once where it was here right outside of San Antonio where I pulled up and, you know, you see bodies laying on the ground with sheets. And the driver saw them put the sheets on. And so that takes a lot. It takes a lot out of them.
No, I
Yes,
think that is, we had talked about this off air, Horatio, but that our country spends a lot of time focusing on the mental health of first responders, of the police, medical professionals, your EMTs, even our military, and the things that they've experienced when they're deployed into war zones, and then the resources that are deployed to help the mental health of those groups. But we have drivers on the road every day of every week encountering some of the same exact things that the police are encountering. I mean, your drivers are potentially, like you mentioned, the first person at the scene of an accident. That is able to call 911, that is able to speak to a first responder that comes there, or may even have to give aid. And the human brain is not conditioned to be able to walk away from those types of experiences without processing that kind of trauma. So it's I don't want to because I'm not a mental health professional, go that it's post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's not unlike it in terms of what drivers are potentially exposed to on the road. And just telling someone to pick themselves up, take a couple days off, come back, we'll get you another load, might not be serving that driver in the best way possible. There may be things that are continuing that need to be processed, addressed, that they need help with. And I think that's something that gets overlooked. So it's not enough just to bring somebody in and talk about, hey, this accident that happened that you were involved in, what occurred. I mean, there's going to be potentially other things emotionally to unpack.
And you know, Craig, on that note, PTSD is relevant to the person. And we talked about it. Some people, they can see something and they can work with it and manage it and be okay. Some people can see it and it's like, hey, you know, it was a game changer. It changed the trajectory of their life because it was too big. It was a big moment. It was just too much for them at one time.
No, I agree with that. So something to think about. Now, Mark, I wanted to pick your brain for a little bit because we have talked when we've had our lawyer speakers on the phone, how the language that some of the plaintiff attorneys are now using is reasonable professional expectation of what a professional company should be doing in terms of gauging the wellness of their employees. And even though it's not an FMCSA requirement, it's not something that DOT is asking them to do, it is something that plaintiff lawyers are leveraging as a way to demonstrate that there are things that a trucking company could have done reasonably, could have accomplished, but didn't. And I just didn't know, Mark, what your take on that was, because I know you've been seeing and reading and studying this reasonable expectation phenomenon as it's been getting more prevalent.
Yes, and it's a pretty easy argument that a carrier, it's a reasonable expectation of a carrier to have in their portfolio of support items an EAP program or something to address this mental health issue that's out there. And in the absence of that, I can assure you a plaintiff's attorney will take advantage of that. And then the other reality, the tangible, is if in the event that your driver is involved and takes a drug screen and let's say passes the drug screen, but then they say, do you have any medications? Are you under any prescriptions? And bang, here it is. Oh, I'm taking this particular or series, and it's very easy to get a prescription out there these days, yeah, plaintiff's attorney is going to eat you alive on that. So I think the mental health of your drivers and being available to help with that, to support that, to not ignore that is a reasonable expectation of every carrier in the United States.
Mm. And, you know, as you talk, I think about the culture, and that's, you know, you, as an organization, you have to have the right culture to where that's valued and that people are willing to talk about it as well.
Yes, I've actually had drivers to come in for their physicals, bringing a McDonald's sack full of medications. I mean, 18 or 20 different medications. And the doctor just comes into my office shaking his head and he goes, "You're not going to believe this." And so it's easy. The availability for these prescriptions is easier today than it was in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And it's something that is a reasonable expectation that a professionally run organization needs to identify and not ignore.
Yeah.
And that critical incident is very, very big. I've dealt with a lot of drivers that have been in some horrific situations, and they have the flashbacks and the distractions from that. And I would very much advise our listeners to take note of that. They've all have drivers that have been involved or seen some of these terrible situations, and there does need to be they need to talk about it. They need to get it out rather than just keep it in, because it just keeps playing back as a like a recording in their head.
Yeah.
I'm not a professional, but that's my understanding of
No, correct. And correct, Mark. And, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking about whether you're in the drop and hook business or if you're in the car loading business, a driver has to have the right focus. And if you have a driver that's not focused because of some type of PTSD, because of something that's going on in the background, it inevitably will lead to an accident or poor performance. Hands down, this industry, the men and women that are out there on the road, they are the most focused at what they do, because it takes a lot to stay engaged with your truck and with your vehicle and the responsibility. You know, I can go on and on. So you got to have the right.
So you've convinced me. Now, what do I do about it?
I'll tell you more.
I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer. Oh, okay. Here we go.
I'm gonna give you more. So first, let's talk about, you know, I touched on the culture and really, you know, the relationship with drivers. When I look at the profile of our industry, and, you know, I go back and look at some of the data coming in from WorkHound as well. The average age of a driver is about 55. You know, the drivers love their toys around smartphones. I remember when I came to the industry, there was BlackBerries and flip phones. And at that point, you could barely get people to use a phone, right? And then we progressed to where certain companies, I don't know who's on this call, but may have policies where, hey, we'll pay a percentage of your cell phone, because drivers like, hey, that's my personal phone, don't call me, right? And not unless you're gonna pay for some of my bills. So, you know, so drivers are engaged with their smartphones. But I think more alarming in our environment is 89% average annual driver turnover. And a lot of times when I hear that number, I instantly think about the ability to create relationships with your most valuable asset, your drivers, how that disrupts your culture. When you have that amount of turnover, it's virtually impossible to create that family and that trusting environment. And then, of course, this speaks to our shortage. I mean, it's about 50K and going every year. The numbers around driver shortages goes up. And, you know, through truck driving schools, we try to be creative, looking at the limit, looking at experience. You know, I recall being on a team, and we were trying to look at, okay, how do we cast a wider net? How do we get more drivers in? Do we cut back on experience? So the driver shortage is real, but there's things that just keep driving it. And we know about the issue. I think a lot of it is related to the ability to connect and have those type of resources for drivers. So I'll talk about the stigma. So we looked at COVID initially, and a lot of times we said, COVID just really just tore our economy apart. It tore families. Of course, a lot of Americans lost their lives behind it. But there's a silver lining with COVID. It really opened that door for mental health and talk more about it, because a lot of Americans, especially, and I call drivers, essential personnel, they were out there working and out there in the beast, out there dealing with COVID. But people started to feel like, hey, I need help. I need some support. Do I have an EAP? How do I go see a counselor? And of course, you couldn't go to an office. So COVID opened up telehealth. And for a period of time, they had it where the insurance companies would allow doctors to do telehealth. It's amazing that we had to wait until we get to COVID to get into an environment where we would take advantage of the technology to make it easier for people to engage in services.
It was a wake-up call. So
it was a wake-up call. So when you talk about breaking the stigma, one is, we love what we call our couch time check-in, which is everyone deserves a couch time. Our primary mode of therapy is what we call CBT, cognitive behavior therapy. And it's that Sigmund Freud theme where you go and sit on the couch and you just sit and you just talk. And so when we think about couch time check-in, you don't have to present an issue. Just say, hey, I just want to do an annual visit to my therapist or to a therapist and just spill my beans and talk about everything in a trusting and safe environment. And I think more importantly, breaking the stigma is about availability of services. And one of the key things that we love with EAPs is making services available to everybody. Outside of EAP, of course, you can get counseling services through the church and other nonprofits, but it's tough really to get good counseling at times. And I would tell you, the talk about anxiety, whether it be mild or severe, is really picking up, and it's kind of people okay with saying, hey, I got a meeting with my therapist next week, and you're okay with saying it. I'm going to see my therapist. I would tell you, any business entrepreneur that's successful, that say, hey, make sure you got a good therapist, because the journey in life, the level of education that you need from a psychoeducation perspective, and knowing those obstacles, knowing that, hey, I feel like this could be anxiety or I'm depressed. Some of this stuff is natural, but if you stay in these areas long enough, they can turn into suicide, the gun shootings, a lot of these things, they quickly go back to mental health. And I just think overall people don't have to suffer in silence. We
agree.
Continue to break the stigma.
Now, I'm sure some of you on the call are going, oh, I got drivers that won't do that. But I bet a year and a half ago, you may have had the same conversation where you were like, oh, I'm going to do all my safety training in person. I'm going to do all my new hire orientation in person. I don't want to have to do this remote. But I bet you did. And I bet you're people that you were putting through this process, because we've all been going through this pandemic together. That is one of the wonderful takeaways of this, is the fact that this is something that we're persevering through as a nation, as a world. But the drivers are adaptable. Drivers do change. Drivers do adopt new modes of behavior. This has been something that Horatio and his group have already experienced and can talk about. I mean, people are they've worked with 40,000 people already doing this. So there are people taking advantage of services like this. So I don't want you to think that remoteness necessarily will drive a different result. This may actually be, some of your folks are perfectly primed to be able to take advantage of telehealth, maybe for the first time in their lives, because they've spent the last year becoming proficient at communicating and interacting and carrying on business that way.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking about Zoom and the other platforms. Drivers have an app. They're very some of the most technologically savvy guys, right? You roll out a new training. I never forget, we rolled out some vertical alliance training, and I think it was set up where they could use their app. It was an app, or they could use their phones. And some of the guys quickly, they already got it up. They're taking their courses. They're getting checked off. You know, drivers engage in technology. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So breaking the stigma, I got this from NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Health Illness. And there's a lot of resources out there, and there continue to be an abundance of them. But, you know, they talk through, how do you break that stigma? It's really talking openly about mental health. As I said earlier, just, it's okay to, hey, I'm going to see my therapist. You know, we'll say, hey, I'm going to get my checkup for prostate. I'm going, you know, you talk about your medical, physical side. It's okay to talk about the mental health side. I'm a big proponent of educating yourself and others. We talked about being conscious of the language that we use. Encourage equality between physical and mental illness. You know, part of the issue is that, you know, we're proactive with our cars. We're proactive when you talk about going to the dentist, you know, every 6 months. But we're not proactive when we talk about our mental health, getting an annual check-in, because really and truthfully, there's no parity between physical and mental health. And I think slowly but surely, we're trying to bridge that gap. Choose empowerment over shame. There's a lot of shame associated with mental health, especially when you talk about marital issues, when you're depressed or you have anxiety. You know, being honest about your treatment and what you're going through, and don't harbor your self-stigma. I mean, it's just because your lens and how you view something, do not put that off on the next person. They may look at it completely different. It's okay not to be okay.
I like the being conscious of language. We had a guest speaker with us. Oh, Mark, it was probably Women in Trucking, was back in January.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a great session about, yes, trucking companies want to hire women, but the way they're communicating that was actually driving women away, because the words they were using, the incentives, the imagery even was anti-woman. And this consciousness of language, understanding that some of the common phrases that we use, calling someone crazy, calling someone nuts, I mean, those are things that have an impact, a negative one, and drive people away from actually seeking help, because they internalize that negativity as a judgment on themselves. And so I don't know, it might be helpful for your organization to take a look at that, and about language, maybe offer some guidance on how your driver managers should address problems, or words they should use instead of others, that will help make for a more impactful conversation in a positive way with a driver that needs help. Because if a driver's coming up and needs help, the worst thing in the world you can do is dismiss that and diminish it by use of language or a lack of compassion.
And you know, Craig, I saw firsthand where you had frontline supervisors, not even second level, really frontline, because that's really where, when you talk about leadership and a relationship with drivers, their direct supervisor, that's who's really driving that tone, even for your culture and with your driver group. And I can think offhand about, you can just see it, where this person needs, you know, they lack the compassion, they lack the patience, and sometimes it's training, and once you expose and give them more insight about a situation, and they see it differently, and then they realize, and I said often, we're in the people business. You know, people don't leave companies, they leave people. And the transportation industry and logistics, hands down, one of the more stressful environments. You know, you're working on holidays, you're working on weekends. You know, transportation drivers move over, what, 80%, 70% of the freight through the U.S. So that big bubble of stress, it, you know, you sometimes just not equipped.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of training comes in with your frontline supervisors, to be aware and to be compassionate and understand services.
And also to be mindful of those signs that you mentioned, changes in behavior, people behaving differently than normal, being able to sort of highlight that, flag that, and know how to respond to it, instead of just, well, he's just in a bad mood today. No, there could be something else going on there. And rather than run with the, oh, he's just in a bad mood today answer, maybe it's an opportunity to pivot to mental health. So.
And so, we talk about the why, and Mark, we're getting to that overall, why do we self-medicate? The stress of the industry itself, lack of sleep. I'm sure you've had other wellness experts come in and talk about how important sleep and how underrated sleep is. I often go back to those 70s, those drivers that I spoke to, my old school drivers, their ability to drive from California, coast to coast, right? It was a big badge of honor. And how did you do that? You had to work around sleep. At that time, you didn't have as stiff hours of service logs the way you have now, but at the end of the day, sleep can be very, very impactful to a driver and drive medication for them. The anxiety, the fear of the unknown, a lot of times, especially with COVID, knowing that you're going to get paid correctly, or knowing that you're going to have a job, or knowing that you're in an environment where you want it. The demanding schedule, the financial challenges. That unfortunately in our industry, there are a lot of drivers that live check to check. They make good money, but they don't make good financial decisions. And so of course that leads to other anxiety and stress. We touched on the health issues. And I think more importantly, drivers are the heart and soul of America. When we talk about moving freight, that number 70% is probably north of 80. Everything that we touch, everything that we consume comes to the back of a driver. And so when we talk about taking care of your asset, investing in them, you want to try to move these obstacles that may make them feel like they're not worthy, or push them to medicate themselves. So these are common drugs that are misused in our industry when we get into stimulants, whether it be around Adderall, caffeine pills, of course, meth and cocaine. But the energy drinks, there's been a spike in that, right? Because you can abuse and go overboard with the energy drinks. The depressants, that's always been big in our environment. When you talk about diabetes and blood pressure medicine, that's the catch up. Drivers that have that medicine and they're trying to catch up and they're not using it correctly. And of course, you got the over-the-counter, the cough and cold medications, and then prescription sleep aids.
I bet just about everybody on this call is familiar with, we know the marijuana, per what we're finding from the Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, that is far and away number one of items being used to self-medicate, and it is taking the most drivers off the road. A lot of those folks are taking marijuana to help relax, to help reduce stress. We say it's being taken recreationally. Yes, the potential for that exists, but there are also people using that to do what potentially therapy would also help solve for. So this is not just cocaine. Obviously, that argument cannot be made. Meth, definitely not. But marijuana, it has different effects, obviously, on the human physiology.
Yeah, I think as we progress, marijuana has presented that same challenge coming out of prohibition with alcohol, right? You had something that was illegal and being banned, and now it's approved by the government. You can sell it legally. Our biggest challenge now with marijuana is, one, it's not legal in all the states. And then two, it's not federally recognized as being legal, right? And so on top of the physical impact, you still have the legal ramifications of engaging with a drug like marijuana, especially when you're in a state where it's not legal.
All right. Now let's talk about what Neely does. And I know we've got some questions in chat. For those of you that have been with us, you probably have some questions that you want to ask Horatio. We're keeping track of those. So if you can open your chat on your menu bar, there's a button that says more, and then there's a button that says chat underneath that. Go ahead and fire that up. We can see the questions that you put in that chat box. We can ask those of Horatio on the air so that we can get you guys some answers specific to your individual needs. You may have certain specific questions you like to ask on air, and we can certainly make that happen. But let's take a look at what you guys are doing specifically with it at Neely. So this is not, we've been talking industry-wide mental health care. Now we're focusing on what you guys do, your specialty.
Yeah, and so, you know, how we arrived at Drive Well was really my background in combination with my partner as well, my wife, is addressing burnout and retention. We know that there's a big gap in our industry around the level, the revolving door. You know, we talked about an 89% turnover rate, but then it's like how and why. And of course, burnout is one of those issues. And so, you know, defining burnout, you know, there's, you know, it's, you can see the definition there, but I think overall there's three things that's driving that burnout. When you, the three dimensions, the feelings of energy depletion and exhaustion. I cannot tell you how many drivers get to the point that I've seen where they're okay with not running their next load. Hey, I need a week. I can't, I'm burned out. I can't haul another load. The money, I know you're paying double, but I'm good. And you got some drivers that, hey, put it out there. I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep rolling. Regardless of what's happening at home, hell, that may be my escape. Increase in mental distance from the job and being negative cynicism. You quickly can pick up on that as well, that they're no longer engaged in the effort, no longer engaged in the company. And I think that goes back to when I hear 89% or even those higher turnover rates, you know, it's easier to just disconnect and then just reduce professional productivity, that you just no longer giving it your best, no longer moving the amount of freight that you could move and that you want to move for the company as well. And so we touched on it. What are some factors? You know, the high demands, the low job control, that one's big. High workload, low reward, and job insecurity. I think the low job control goes back to the relationship between the driver and the management team and the driver or your dispatch team. Because there's points in that relationship where a driver feels like he's at the mercy of whomever is dispatching him or her, right? And so that drives and fuels that feeling as well. The low reward, you know, I helped create and spearhead an effort to create a driver management system to where, you know, drivers have a scorecard. And what I saw to be effective is if you can create a driver scorecard and give it to them monthly, drivers know where they stand. They know where they're positioned with the loads and their miles. They can see how close they are to the million mile load. And while we're at it, if you hit this certain threshold, you qualify for a bonus. So it's kind of having a nice reward in place outside of the monetary gain for drivers. And then, you know, the consequences, the relationships, the broken relationships, the alcohol and substance abuse. We talked about depression and the suicide and the driver turnover, decrease in productivity and effort. This one here is big, decreased customer satisfaction. And I know that a lot of fleets, and you've seen this as well, Mark, is no one else touches your customer better than your driver. As a matter of fact, you never really see your customer. Your driver, they're the face. So if you have disgruntled drivers who can care less about about your company or being compliant and they show up at a customer site, it can really impact your bottom line of your business as well. And then of course that bottom one, increase accidents and work errors. That level of focus that it takes to be that million-mile driver, to have every load delivered safe and on time without any issues, is big. And so burnout can definitely impact that, one of those variables.
Yeah, and I just got to throw this in real quick. We have a lot of school bus clients. What could be worse than having a driver of a school bus on a burnout?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And so when you look at their clients or their customers,
Yep.
Kids and children, right? It's a lot coming at drivers, regardless whether they're in freight or if they're in moving, they're in the school bus industry. It's big.
Awesome. All right, now you all have taken the time to actually put together training that companies can assign out to their staff, their drivers, but obviously any employee that they have. And just because you're not a driver does not mean you are not under stress at your job and potentially in need of help. Tell us about this Driving Well course.
So a couple things. One, it's it's video-based, it's CBT, computer-based training for drivers and the transportation staff. Second thing is that we give some real good tools and drive well around managing mental health and your emotional health, because you have burnout, feelings of being lonely, communication issues, anxiety, substance abuse, substance use, and more. Because when I go back and I think about communication, right? Being able to effectively communicate how you feel, or communicate with your spouse, or communicate with your dispatcher management team, that's real big. But the sessions are broken out into 5 to 10 minute different sessions around anxiety, relationships, depression, physical health, stress management, and personal growth. And really and truthfully, the content in each one of those sessions designed to educate. And at the end of each one of those modules, we have what we call a couch time check-in, where you get professional guidance from a LPC or a psychiatrist that kind of helps navigate through that issue for a driver or their spouse. And I think more importantly, once you have access, and this is big, not only does the driver have an opportunity to participate, but their spouse can participate in it as well, especially a relationship video. I think they get a lot out of that. One of the key things, and it goes without saying, whether it's, you come into an organization or whether you're using a tool like this, you have to have an assessment. So we have a driver burnout inventory to kind of assess where that person's at in those 3 different phases. And then, what we love about it, you can take the course on any device, anytime, anywhere. And so we're just excited to partner with Infinity, because hands down, you guys are the leader in the mobile training space.
That is our goal. Yeah, as Horatio mentioned, we are adding these 7 sessions to our catalog. These will be available for anyone that currently has the Infinity Workforce System at no charge. And I like this because, one, some of you have been asking us for years, can we have more wellness training? And part of the challenge is that we don't have any Horatios in our office. So we needed to go partner with Horatio so we could have his expertise to help craft this content that is impactful. But this also has that ability to be both proactive and reactive. This is content you can assign out in advance of a challenge so that employees become more proficient at identifying what's going on with themselves before it becomes point of no return. But then there's also the ability to assign it after the fact as a way to help reinforce positive behaviors for those folks that need reinforcement on some of these challenges that they're going through. So we are completing the integration of this content. So we'll probably be sending out an additional email to you all very soon to let you know once that goes live. But once it goes live, it's assignable, just like every other piece of content that we have in our library. It looks a little bit different than the content that we currently have in there. So that's how you know it's theirs. But we're excited by this because this is definitely an area of need that you all have communicated to us that you have. And we want to make sure that you get material that is impactful, helpful, and really makes a difference for your folks, because we want your drivers to stay on the road too. We talk to your drivers every day, you guys. We probably talk to some of your drivers more than you do when they need their passwords and so forth. So we want them to stay your drivers and get the help that they need if they need it. Now, in addition to that, though, in addition to this coursework, so this Drive Well piece, you have also put together your own EAP program that is logistics focused.
Yeah, so with our program, you could select up to 1 to 6 counseling sessions per year. We talked about the annual couch time check-in that we promote and we encourage through the EAP. The legal and financial resources where they have access to an attorney for a free 30-minute consultation. The financial resources that help them with budgeting and things of that nature. The wellness training where we have live monthly trainings, and then we craft and generate a monthly newsletter. And then the critical incident stress debriefing, having someone available within 2 to 3 hours of an incident, either on site and virtually, to be available for debriefing. And then I love the work-life resources where with drivers and their family or employees, they can reach out to someone and they could have, a babysitter, find a babysitter for them. They can find a pet grooming location. If you have an elderly parent, you can find someone for assistance through those services as well. So we really love the work-life resources.
Excellent. And is this something that you guys are offering? Is this national? Is this a program that can be used coast to coast?
Can be used coast to coast, and we're actually looking at expanding into Canada.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
I know we have had some of our Canadian friends express interest in the webinar. I hope they're on today. Because they wanted to learn as well. So what I wanted to do now is a couple things. One, first I want to hit you guys on our call today with a poll question. And we've got a couple questions for you here. One, we do offer a free trial of our training program. So I know some of you might be very interested in taking advantage of that wellness content. And you could do that through the free trial that we make available. It's a 30-day complimentary trial, so you can get in, kick the tires with our system, but also do good by your fleet at the same time with that wellness content. Some of you may want to speak further with Horatio about what his group is doing, about their employee assistance program, or even if there's folks that you have on your team that need counseling options in sooner rather than later. And then thirdly, because we do believe in every tool, every weapon at your disposal will help make a difference in the life of your drivers. We do have our sister company is bettertruckdrivingjobs.com, and they're offering anyone who's joining us on the call today a free 1 year of job postings. So feel free to take advantage of that as well, because that's something that's going to help make a difference, and may even some of the stuff that we talked to today may even change the verbiage and things like that you use in the ads that you put out there. So we'll go ahead and leave those poll questions up for another moment or so. And then I wanted to make sure that I'm sure that there are questions that some of you have that you do not feel comfortable asking on air, and that is perfectly fine. This is a no shame zone. We're going to make sure that you have Horatio's information so that you can reach out to him after the fact and let him know, and then he can visit with you specifically about your challenge. And there we go. There's the website for Neely Counseling. There's Horatio's contact information down there in the lower left. I saw this. You guys have a podcast that you do as well?
Yes, Dr. Neely, she has a podcast she runs, comes on every 2 weeks, and it's called Drop the BS, Drop Your Backstory. And so she brings on different speakers, and really have an opportunity to talk about living your best life, but understanding your backstory so you can live a better today's story.
Excellent. Excellent. All righty. And if anyone has any questions for Horatio, while we've still got him on the line, feel free to fire those off in chat. Otherwise, I know we hit you guys today with a ton of information, covered a lot of ground in an hour. And this is by no means authoritative on this subject. So if there are other things that you would like to ask questions about Horatio in terms of treatment options, mental health solutions, things that you're encountering in the workplace that you need advice on, please, please, please reach out to him. That's what they do morning, noon, and night, y'all. So they're here to help us. They get what the trucking industry does. They are trucking people. And I mean, I know HEB because I grew up in San Antonio. It is the grocery store in South Texas. Nobody can compete against them, and they are hauling food every single day.
And you know what's unique about that, and we didn't touch on it. There's two things, and I want to come back for you too, Mark. One, HEB, they refer to their employees as partners. Subtle, but it's big. You're a partner. And then, Mark, the second thing, when we talk about more about fee, how do you, when you're in a position and you have a driver that have mental health issues, you know, we get into how do you treat anxiety? How do you treat depression? And through that treatment, how does that impact the driver's tour duty, right? And so maybe I'll get Dr. Neely to come back and take us through that as well.
Yes, and that treatment can be counseling as opposed to medication.
Cognitive behavior therapy.
Yep. And counseling works.
Counseling works, and it's very effective. I would challenge you guys, set up a session, do a free couch time check-in. You know, we offer that too, a free 30-minute session. I think part of the biggest issue is getting over the intimidation of going to see someone that, hey, this person knows something is wrong with me, not knowing that this person is there to help you. But I believe in therapy, psychotherapy, because it helps to talk through issues versus trying to self-medicate.
And they could reach out to you about taking advantage of that at your email address?
Exactly.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. One last thing for you all is just a quick slide about our free trial there. So we appreciate you all being here with us today. Horatio, thank you so much. This was great. Mark, it is always a pleasure to spend time with you, sir. You know it. And yeah, let's go out there and make a difference in the lives of our truck drivers, everyone. So appreciate you being with us this Friday afternoon. And everyone be safe out there, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Horatio.
All right.